Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Well, as businesses grapple to retain key staff, employee engagement initiatives have never been more important, especially with the costs associated with staff turnover being so high. Here to tell us about the increasing importance of employee engagement initiatives is Sarah Fagan from Adare. Sarah, Adare recently published a study of the key workforce trends and challenges in 2024, and one of the key findings that caught my eye was rising workforce conflicts. What is causing the increased incidence of conflicts within the workforce?
Good morning. Thank you for having me on. Well, look, I think we've seen from our HR Barometer survey, which is a national survey and reflects information across sectors, that there's been significant rise in discipline and grievances. If you consider that we're operating, for the best part, in a hybrid working model, I think that has led to a lot of the conflicts and disputes that are rising in terms of presenteeism and communication and, management or perceived mismanagement on occasions, because we have teams that are dispersed across the business and across the work environment, meaning that communications have been significantly impacted.
Now, one of the key services offered by Adare is dispute resolution and representation. So what approach does the company follow to resolve the conflict internally and thus avoiding the legal route?
So it's really important for myself and the team when we're advising any of our clients or supporting them in the management of these types of complaints. We always look to assess, where could this go? We scenario sort of the areas of risk that might arise by it, moving forward into a third party, such as the Workplace Relations Commission or the Labour Court. And we work backwards in terms of our support to ensure that we're mitigating the steps. It's so important when we're supporting clients to ensure that they have the proper information on record when communicating with employees. It's something as simple as writing a letter for a particular client can help mitigate any of those risks. But, for the best part, we're looking to see, can we, mediate any conflict or dispute? And if that doesn't or isn't an option at that point, we effectively can lead out on investigations and to ensure that, the proper terms of reference are being used that are aligned to the appropriate code of practice, that the various steps being followed are fully compliant, so that at least we're mitigating the risk from a procedural perspective. And obviously we're looking to support the client to address any of the substantive nature of the complaint, which are two key areas that adjudicators would look at the WRC when they're assessing complaints if they move that far.
And also within the study, employee engagement and retention were identified as the top priorities for employers. How would you define employee engagement and how can it be realised within an organisation?
Yeah, look, our HR Barometer survey definitely showed that employee engagement remains a top priority again this year for almost 1 in 2 organisations. And when you consider that employee engagement is defined as the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel towards their work, their team and the organisation that they work for, in particular, as we're operating in a hybrid world, that continued focus on employee engagement underscores the real importance placed on maintaining a motivated and committed workforce. So the main thing is looking at the data that you have. A lot of organisations will take a pulse survey when it comes to employee engagement to really, get a sense of how employees are feeling about the work, their work environment and so forth. But what's crucial following those types of surveys is that you assess the information, which is usually anonymised, and that you put tangible actions in place to address any concerns. What we're also seeing is that there's a huge movement in terms of fully unleashing the potential of both your business and employees by looking at career paths in a non-traditional sense. One of the top areas that employees will look to in terms of their engagement is their career development and career progression. And, as we're operating at almost full employment and, with a skills shortage still prevalent, across Ireland, it is essential that organisations are looking at identifying the future skills requirements seeing what skills are in their business. Can those be transitioned across departments so that there can be a real movement to, amend the traditional career paths in a way that's setting up the business for the future and keeping the employees engaged in terms of their own professional development.
Well, if you've just tuned in, I'm speaking to Sarah Fagan from Adare. Sarah, employee retention is an age-old problem for the business world, but it's far more complex than just about remuneration, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, it comes back to employee engagement being a top priority as well. But we always see retention as a key challenge and priority for businesses in our HR barometer data every year. In fact, we do the survey twice a year and it tends to show up in the top three. What we have seen in a post-pandemic era is that a lot of organisations were being reactive, and that's because there was a need to do that in terms of the external market influencers when we're looking at high employment, the high inflation rates last year, employee preferences, requirements, etc. What we're now seeing is businesses identifying the proactive need to consistently look at retention strategies. So what's really exciting to see is across sectors, organisations are looking at employee retention from the moment an employee enters employment with their business. So it's no longer about being, addressing the sort of reactive nature of what's happening externally with the market and impacting your business internally. Now it's all about what can we do from onboarding an employee? How do we address retention throughout the employee life cycle, right to and including offboarding? So introducing things like stay interviews, like throughout the employee relationship, is hugely important. You're getting an opportunity to sit down with your employees and understand what's important to them. Understand, are there any flight risks within your business, and see, what tangible actions can you take as an employer that will, ensure the longevity of that relationship, so you continue to invest in it and you continue then to reap the rewards as an employer because you have a more engaged workforce.
And in further emphasising the impact of high employee turnover, the study recorded the costs associated with low retention levels.
Since 2022, we're seeing an increase in the cost of replacing an employee. The average coming in just under €10,000. And that's such a significant cost for organisations, regardless of size. When we see sort of employee turnover rates being at 14-12%, those are the types of things that you need to start planning for in terms of that type of budgetary spend. And whilst, all organisations, will always experience a percentage of employee turnover, like natural attrition that will happen, it's really important to understand what are the costs associated with it. Wouldn't it be better to invest it within the employee life cycle in terms of professional development, ensuring that you are retaining key talent within your business rather than having to pay the associated costs from, advertising roles to management time in having to recruit new roles. But that kind of information is really important, and it's really essential for businesses to start planning it when we're seeing those kind of averages coming in.
There has been a battle between some organisations that want a full-time return to the office and their employees desire to continue to work remotely. But how has this been playing out in general?
Look, over the last couple of years, we've been assessing through our HR barometer survey, like what hybrid percentages are commonplace in the workplace. And more significantly, this year, we're seeing a drop in hybrid working from our latest research, which we published just a number of weeks ago, moving from 7 out of 10 organisations to 4 out of 10 organisations having hybrid working practices in place. And that's a huge downward shift. And what we're understanding, from clients and, businesses across sectors is that there is a movement, not necessarily to remove hybrid working, because obviously we have the code of practice that has recently been published in terms of the right to request remote working, but really about ensuring that your business objectives are being met and trying to balance the organizational needs with the employee needs and the flexibility that they're looking for. And it's all about ensuring that you're addressing challenges of culture, that you're effectively supporting your employees in a manner that works for both you and the business.
Do you expect many further employment law changes over the coming years?
I do. I think that, looking down the line, obviously we're seeing a lot of the European Union influencers that will impact, obviously, on any transposition of legislation into Ireland, and that will continue. One of the key areas that is coming down the line, but obviously not till 2026, is pay transparency directive, and how we as businesses or employers address those key areas. And that's coming from the European Union being a main influencer. But, there are other areas, that the government's initiatives in terms of auto-enrollment and pensions and so forth, obviously increases in statutory sick pay is something that has been planned out over the next couple of years. So there's still a lot of changes to come. What we can hope for, though, is that organisations have the know-how, have the skill sets, within their businesses to ensure that they're applying the legislative requirements in a manner that is fully compliant. And if they don't have those skill sets, that they are looking externally to ensure that they're bringing them in-house.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Sarah Fagan from Adare, and I'd like to thank Sarah for sharing her insights into the latest HR developments with us this morning.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.